Shin Megami Tensei has always been a black sheep in the otherwise expansive and widespread genre that is the JRPG. Even from its title, it's the only modern JRPG to not use an English name or a katakana in its branding. This literally says Final Fantasy, and this just says Dragon Quest in English right on the front, along with the katakana saying the same. For those that don't know, and in short, katakana is a syllabary that the Japanese language uses to pronounce words that are not native to the Japanese language itself. In Dragon Quest case, there's a word for dragon and it's Ryu. No, not Ryu. Ryu. You gotta hold the U. So here they deliberately went with the katakana version Doragon. This is also present in Dragon Ball. You see, it's the same. Now, this video isn't about understanding the language of the Red Sun. It's just important to note that there is a pattern to name IPs that might extend past the borders of Japan with the katakana version of names. But Shin Megami Tensei does not. And to my knowledge, has ever went with katakana or even translating the name when using the English alphabet. No, they go with what they are, and that is in the true spirits to what you'll be experiencing when you start this franchise. Translated, True Goddess Reincarnation does everything it can to set itself apart not only in name, but in many other places as well. This video is meant to be a starting point for anyone who isn't familiar with the series, is thinking about playing through the series, or just wants to know what all the hubbub is about without actually playing the games themselves. Shin Megami Tensei, which I'll be referring to as SMT from now on, is a franchise that boasts numerous titles. Most of these titles are video games, but there are a few animes and books that the series owes its start to. In fact, there are so many titles that it can be a bit hard to know where to jump in. My direct answer to this dilemma is to start at the beginning with these books. Still, if you're watching this video, chances are you want to play a video game. And if you actually manage to find your way here, you most likely read a bunch of forum posts where people ask the exact same thing. Where do I start in this series? Well, I can't answer that question easily, but I can give you some knowledge to help you make that decision easier because I myself was once faced with that monumental task. So this is what I decided to do on that fateful day in 2019, and it will be the basis for this video. We're going to start at the beginning with SMT1, then play our way through the series, numbered titles only. This means SMT 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're doing this to not only familiarize ourselves with the series' roots, but appreciate how SMT evolved over time, innovate on old ideas, and, just grow as an IP. So once we finish a game, we're going to give ourselves license to check out one other title from the series that interests us around the same release date. Of course, since I'm making this video, you'll see what I chose and why, but feel free to do what you like. Without further ado, let's board this SMT train and go on a journey that we will never forget. I've already done a video exclusively on SMT1 back when I thought I was only going to play that, so I'll invite you to watch it because I focus specifically on the game as a solo entity. But since this video is about the entry as a part of a series, I'll be covering it the same as the other titles we'll be talking about. So the first choice to make here is figuring out how to actually play the damn game, and option 1 is going hardcore and finding a Japanese copy along with the hardware to run it. But I'd honestly recommend going the pirate route and seeking to play this game through a ROM on an actual computer. To clarify, don't run this on a mobile device. Of course you can, but I'm recommending this for aesthetic reasons, mostly because of the keyboard. The only way this could have been done for a long time was by playing the 1992 Super Nintendo version translated by Aeon Genesis in 2002. Still, now we also have the option of playing the 2003 Game Boy Advance version translated by Jimzaten. Both are easily found online, so make sure you read up about bugs and crashes that these versions may come with. I assure you they exist, but mostly make a decision based on your preferred experience. I chose the Super Nintendo Aeon Genesis version because it was the only available option at the time, but if I had the choice, I'd still go with this version. Regardless of what you choose, booting this game up signifies one thing: the end of your sanity. Now your nightmares will be filled with unforgiving game mechanics and endless labyrinths in which every step is a random battle where you'll have to fight for your life. Like seriously, every battle is potentially game ending. You can't take any one of them lightly. Luckily, it's not all bad, for you have the future on your side. This game will get about 15% easier through emulation. I've emulated many games in my life, but this is the only one I would genuinely recommend using all of the nifty quality of life features included in a standard emulator. Without mentioning any of the mechanics in the game, take the time right now to set rewind, fast forward, and save states to a button on your keyboard that is easy to reach, because these 3 buttons will be the only gods you will pray to at night for the foreseeable future. From here on out, I will be referring to these keys as the Holy Trinity.
Allow the player's heart to beat again. Quench their thirst. May her save states be plentiful. Make his fast forward be at least 3 times speed. And may all of our rewind stretch further than 2 minutes.
Alright, finally, you're ready to boot the game up. Let me show you SMT versions out there, some things you're most likely already familiar with. Yeah, you feel that? That sense of mysticism and curiosity? The feeling of not knowing what the future holds, but secure that you'll be okay on this fun adventure of a lifetime? Do you feel that happiness? Do you feel the glee? Well, when you boot up SMT, you get this. This game hasn't even started, and it's already setting vibes that no other RPG of its time could even compare to. This game, literally on sight, gets you accustomed to uneasiness, anxiety, and anguish with the low, slightly dissonant piano, and even death with a heartbeat as the percussion of the title music. You're aware that whatever's behind this start button is going to be some shit, dude. Assuming you got the balls to make it this far, you're met with a few scenes that should be easily recognized as character creation, but with a bit of a twist. You'll notice parallels to religious iconography to a certain monotheistic religion that is popular around the world. I was confused by this, and it definitely poured fuel into my nervousness fire. To me, these signs in such proximity to each other scream, "We're setting a tone, and goddammit, we will put you in your place by any means necessary." And it 100% worked on me. Everything on display in the opening scenes of the game is reasonably normal by any other context. Somber even, picking up groceries, going to the mall. But I knew better because, like you, I wasn't quick to forget those eerie visuals at the start, which had my head on a swivel, looking for what was lurking behind me. And then it happens. Someone dies to some random thing, and the true existential dread of SMT starts to rear its ugly head through the hole that's been slowly gaping for the past hour and a half. Demons take over Tokyo, and of course it's your job to fight and survive with your buddies, which hopefully you named after your real-life friends. Because if you search hard enough online, you can find a lot of suggested names for these characters based on other materials. But trust me, this game is better with your own made-up names, especially if you can take them from your own life. You'll scrape by from place to place, barely surviving until you run into this place, the Jokyo Manor. Going inside teaches you that you're actually able to recruit demons to fight alongside you, if you haven't figured it out already, leading you to a mechanic still featured in the SMT series to this day. Demon negotiations. Demon negotiations are a core gameplay loop in the series and intrinsic to the game's identity. If there's just one thing you take from this video, let it be this, because demon negotiations alone let you in about 40% of the SMT memes lurking on the internet. With that being said, convincing a demon to join you can never be mastered. You can see the same demon 40 times and each interaction is different, with varying results. Use the Holy Trinity whenever possible when dealing with new demons. You will soon learn that the game could care less about how you negotiate with demons, and in most cases you lose no matter what you say, even if you try every option possible through the reverse key god. There are times when demons won't even speak to you because they are enraged at the phase of the moon, which is another mechanic. It is explained very minimally in the game with varying degrees of importance, but by and large, this moon mechanic can be ignored since it controls so few things in SMT1. However, I will explain how it works. The moon and a fraction are always on screen no matter where you are in the game, showing you presumably what phase the moon is in as it orbits the Earth. The moon is said to control the behavior of demons much like it can control the actions of your ex-girlfriend.
Got it!
Once you recruit minions into your demon army, you'll inevitably check their stats, load out, and realize that there aren't descriptions for any of the items or any of the spells that you and your demons can cast. Everything and its effects are trial by fire. Again, you use the Holy Trinity whenever possible and keep a few post-it notes or even a notebook nearby to write down anything important. Trust me, this is how the pros do it. This information is also easily found online, but since this is your first game, you'll have a hard time finding out precisely what the truth is, since the translated version of the game you're playing won't exactly match up with the online lists. So stick with what I'm saying. Most items and attacks you'll do so often you'll commit to memory, like Soma, Zio, and Agi, but I went through this whole game not knowing what some of these items did. If you do want to search for descriptions and items online, the best place to start searching for things and their descriptions is on GameFAQs through Infinity Dragon. That dude knows what he's talking about. As you start to rack up playing hours in SMT1, you'll begin to understand what the game's about. A struggle for power, deities and pantheons walking the earth, gang fights in the streets, and sitting inside of a manor fusing demons endlessly because the ones you have are ugly and weak. The second primary mechanic of this game, and honestly the entire IP, is demon fusing. Take 2 or 3 different demons and mash them into one. The in-game chart that is meant to assist you with this process begins to make sense after about 50 hours of gameplay, and until then you'll be fusing demons randomly. Your goal will be to combine a demon as high of a level as the game allows, which is usually capped at whatever the level of the main character is. The more you play, the more you realize that your success is always tied to having the latest, strongest demons associated with your main character's level. You will learn to fuse each demon you come in contact with and never ever get attached to demons on your team. Falling in love with a particular design is a fast track to meetings with the Holy Trinity. Get over it and fuse that son of a bitch. Again, use a notebook to write down any fusions available with your current roster, but be aware that you probably won't be able to complete them due to your possible low level. Make sure to write it down. You will forget by the time you reach another mansion because, by this point, you would have learned how egregiously, impossibly, unapologetically long these dungeons are. Write fusion possibilities down. You will be lost in each main dungeon for a minimum of a week or 2. Each new area is a relentless gauntlet with random encounter rates of 60% on the low end. S&T, of all RPGs I've ever played, scratch that, of any game I have ever played in my life, has the possibility of teaching you a critical life lesson, and that is love the process. If you're the kind of person who doesn't enjoy the journey and only feels fulfillment at the destination, just do something else. If you don't enjoy battling endlessly, just do something else. If you're only playing this game to say you completed it and then turn around and discourage others from playing because of the encounter rate, then for the cheap seats in the back, just do something else. This game isn't for you, and it's fine if you don't want to play it. If you have a job you hate and do it to collect another paycheck, that is not your job. If you're only in a relationship because you want to be married one day, or you're too embarrassed to break up, or feel that you've invested too much of your life into someone, then you need to rip that band-aid off, homie. Life is short. Find someone you actually want to be with. If you're someone who has ever at any point said they couldn't draw, I implore you, pick up a pencil and draw something right now. Yes, you. Art is about the process of creating, the journey of knowledge to convey ideas you're having, not the destination. On second thought, keep watching this video. I have a lot left to say, so draw later. But get this game is random battles. It is turn-based. And if you can't get over that, if you can't get with it, you're gonna have a terrible time with this game. So, at the end of the day, get used to the fact that SMT is a dungeon crawler. After completing this game, you'll see that people in more prominent online Shin Megami Tensei communities are divided on SMT1 because of its difficulty. But if you take your time, explore what you want to explore without necessarily needing to find the exit, make the decision you want to make instead of using a guide to make decisions for you, I promise you that you'll have a fun time. It'll be a journey you won't ever forget. Mostly because it's nightmare fuel and you'll die a million deaths. But to be more serious, do what you want. Use a guide when you want, fuck around when you want, hold on to that demon you're attached to for a bit longer if you really like it that much. But trusting the process is the number one thing you can do to make Shin Megami Tensei a fun experience, and you'll get it eventually. So far, we've talked about many things that set us up for the next 4 games in the franchise, but we still need to make our first detour into the other titles in the franchise, which aren't many to pick from at this point. We will be going over the Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei OVA. Unlike the other available choices, I picked this one because you're going to be facing massive burnout by the end of Shin Megami Tensei, so watching an anime is the perfect way to wind down and hold hype for the future of the series. This hour-long film was made in 1987. It retells the original Digital Devil Story book that started the whole franchise. You have the option to play the game that also adapts the book, albeit very loosely at this point in our series playthrough, but later there is an opportunity to do the same thing with updated graphics. Watching this OVA after finishing SMT1 will convince you Cerberus is one of the brand's mascots, of course, but at this point you should have run into Jack Frost, who is the official brand mascot. So sad, we'll just have to keep a special place in our hearts for Cerberus. So let's keep going with Shin Megami Tensei 2. As far as I'm aware, the only way to play this game is by finding the 1994 Super Nintendo version translated again by Aeon Genesis in 2004. SMT2 continues the previous game's story and brings over all the earlier game's mechanics. I didn't delve into each of those mechanics in the previous segment to purposely explain them here. Magnetite is an interesting concept present in both SMT1 and 2. It is needed to summon a demon from your comp and to keep them summoned. It works very similarly to currency in these games, even though currency does exist. This battle mechanic also shows a single demon sprite on screen, but there are actually multiple demons you're fighting represented by these things at the top of the battle screen. A final mechanic worth pointing out is the 6-member party you can have for battles. These 6 include demons, the main character, and other human allies that fight alongside you. The roster is constantly changing throughout both games, but it always seems to converge on one male and one female character when the game rolls around to an end. One core element of game design that has changed is the overworld map. You'll immediately feel how easy it is to find locations in this game due to it being organized by cardinal directions. Don't get me wrong, you can and will get lost in this game, but it's easier to work with the names of locations and where they might be. You're also met with this tiny blue guy again to indicate your party on the map. This is the final unmentioned mechanic I want to talk about. In SMT1, by watching the arrow and the way it spins, you can figure out what alignment you are. But in SMT2, that is no longer the case. The best way to figure out your alignment is to receive healing at the various healing locations led by certain factions in the game. And if they kick you out or ask you to pay, assume you're of the opposing alignment. This is for people who are trying to get a specific ending. SMT2 builds on the fusion system that SMT1 set, improving the overall game experience. Skills are transferred now, you couldn't do that in the first game, and if you take the time to look it up, you can even find special fusions. Next up, the moon system makes a comeback, and it is still as skippable as before. Granted, it sports lots of cool, new, noticeable, exciting features, but still it's just meh. And I'm saying it because the game doesn't divulge the full possibilities of the moon cycles or the gem system, so I'm limited to just the average non-guided user's playthrough of the game because that's going to be the average experience, not an SMT veteran's point of view. This mystical chest will only open during a full moon, If you want in, you'll have to walk around until the moon gets to the correct phase just to collect what's inside. The demon spawn rate is just as nasty as it was in the first game, and it's already challenging traveling from destination to destination. So getting distracted and willfully running in circles for about 10 to 20 minutes just to spawn one gemstone was not worth my time. Especially with death being so easy to run into. Even the Holy Trinity doesn't help collecting gems without obsessively tracking the moon phases all throughout your gameplay. But I will give the system a bit of credit because it has definitely been improved upon. You can take certain gems and gem combinations to be traded in for demons now, and that's always good considering the possible fusions you can make. But again, there is never an actual need to do this. This portion of the content is optional and left to those who want to fuse for particular demons. I shit you not, I went through this whole game without collecting a single gem, so you should be fine as well. It's so skippable that I have a faint memory of it actually being in SMT1, this like gems for demons thing, but it might have well just been lost in the code. It's just unsupported. Aside from those things, SMT2 is an upgrade to the experience of playing SMT1. It's like a breath of fresh, organized air. SMT1 was set in a location that mirrored real-world Tokyo. And while I've never been to the real-life city itself, traversing the landscape in that game felt very open-world-esque. A lot of exploration was needed to advance the story since the design lent itself to a more choose-your-own-adventure kind of theme, but SMT2 throws that out the window and gives you multiple options based on either going up, down, left, or right, thus cementing your place in the new Tokyo Millennium built directly above the remains of the old Tokyo that was eviscerated in the first game. You can still get lost in the large labyrinths, but anyone who made it through will notice just how much more fluid these maps are to navigate. Don't get me wrong, you'll still lose your mind in these things, but still, there are more NPCs to discover this go around that will cement some of the otherwise empty corridors in your mind as, oh, I remember when I met that guy here, or I remember when I fixed the air conditioner in this place. There are enough quests that actually rely on you remembering where a few of these people are, so write down anything that seems important if you happen to run into an NPC saying weird shit a little early. The overworld received an excellent upgrade too in the form of these slight indentations on the ground. At first, I wasn't sure why it was happening, but running your blue character over one of these will trigger a small cutscene with an NPC. And what's even better, what the NPCs say changes as the story continues. There's a large screen in most of the areas of the game that updates you on what's currently happening in the story. And overall, while this game is still a mazy sea of confusion, it helps to know that the developers gave us these little fish hooks to reel us back in. So naturally, I think the best addition to this game is the Fortune Teller. For 100 Maka, the in-game currency, she'll straight up tell you where you need to go, or what you need to do, which would be a welcome feature in an SMT1 remake or remaster. Fingers crossed that they get around to it. It was refreshing to see descriptions of items in stores before you buy them. The system is very clunky, but it gets the job done, and for a sequel game that had no problem throwing me in the deep end to drown, I'll take what I can get. There's even a feature added in a comp that enables you to see the item effect of anything you have on you. Once you unlock this feature, you're told it isn't as valuable as the non-comp item analyzing systems, but it's good enough and does most things just fine. You can tell that the art direction of the demons and characters took precedence, but the actual locations jump slightly in quality. It's easier now to recognize where you are and how a dungeon from one part of the overworld looks thematically different from a dungeon in another part of the overworld. SMT2 is also very special in deciding to railroad players who choose to give characters stock names. This is the first time I've ever seen this done in a video game. The alignment mechanic not only dictates what ending you'll get, but what demons you're allowed to summon. Both SMT1 and 2 start you off in the middle or neutral alignment, and then transition to law or chaos based on your decisions in the game. But I ran into a problem. I was only able to summon law demons. At first, it made sense because of the nature of the story being told near the beginning, but as I racked the hours, I realized something was very wrong with how the game was treating me. So, one Google search later, I discovered that by leaving all the characters with their default names, the game's alignment system automatically assigned me enough points to make my playthrough start lawful. From a story/developer point of view, I thought it was a great idea. I always loved recalling memories of the times I played Zelda: A Link to the Past and named the character my own name and felt like I was the hero. But Time went on, and of course, I started choosing the character's actual name of Link, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have too. And now the tie between me and that character has been severed. I'm eternally bound to enjoying his stories in the third person, and no longer reveling in the first person narrative I created for myself as a kid. A lot of RPGs try to recreate this sense of wonder. The first Final Fantasy has nameless characters, and it's very accepted and expected of you to name your Pokemon trainer something you identify with instead of defaulting for Ash or Red. Even with SMT1, I recommended naming your characters whatever you want instead of using the online recommended Sho, Kazuya, or Futsuo. But for some reason, the urge to rename the characters in SMT2 didn't happen this time. And I'm kind of glad it didn't, because it brings up an element of game design that I often take for granted. I typically name other characters after people I know in real life, and with the nature of SMT2's story, naming the characters after people I know in real life would have heavily influenced my decisions more than if I hadn't. Well, enough of the nerd philosophy, and long story short, I had to forcibly claw my way back to neutrality just so I could summon whatever demon I wanted. I also think this particular game design element might clue us into what the developers had in mind for the average player experience, which I'll assume is the law ending. How's that for a troll post on Reddit? Yeah, don't be like these guys. Keep your minds open, guys. Don't let anyone tell you anything. Now that we've finished SMT2, let us forge on to the franchise's other games. Notable picks will be Shin Megami Tensei. I believe this game was made for people really into the root concepts that SMT provided in the past. Still, I'm willing to bet that enough of you guys are interested in the franchise's spin-off series, Persona, and this is the perfect time to explore that side of the franchise and where it came from. I booted up SMT If, the last original game the series made for the Super Nintendo, and completed a trilogy of titles. SMT 1 and 2 are, for all intents and purposes, a single story spanning several years, but If takes place on a separate timeline, splitting off from certain events in SMT 1, and focuses on a small group of characters as they deal with the school shooter of the bunch who sent their entire building into the abyss or something. Gameplay-wise, If plays exactly like the previous two games. The most significant difference between all three of these titles would be their completion times. SMT 1 takes the longest, mainly because the gameplay is brand new to you and it's gonna take some in-game hours alone to fully understand what's happening. And by the time you roll into SMT2, you've been primed, so you should be able to clear it in a pretty healthy time. Now, If can be completed very, very fast. I completed it in 5 real-life days. 5. Of course, this is only after playing the other two titles and already knowing what to do and expect, and of course relying on the Holy Trinity. I'd wager that an expert could clear it in a single day if they really wanted to. Two differences of note in If are the Guardian system and the assortment of characters. The Guardian system was pretty cool. If you died in the 2 previous games, you had to do a full restart from your last save. It was classic video game stuff, but it created a gameplay loop that can be abused with the Holy Trinity, and you'd be a fool not to abuse it. But in If, you'll get stat bonuses and upgrades depending on how long you lived. Dying actually being beneficial to you makes something usually frustrating turn into something really cool to mess around with. The system was so good, in fact, that they developed it further and started the Persona series. The previous 2 SMT games had an assortment of other characters in and out of your party, mainly because they had their own character arcs to fulfill. In If, you can actually choose a permanent partner from the jump, and you'll have a different playthrough based on who you picked. Now, this is impossible to tell on your own, as the game holds that this is possible, and you'll most likely end up playing the game with this character by your side. It's not the end of the world, but it could have been better considering that her playthrough is very similar to another playthrough, just with 2% less content. Previously, I said this game could be completed in about 5 days, and maybe someone could do it even quicker than that, but when you consider restarting and playing with a different side character, that playtime can get easily quintupled. I like this approach because SMT games up to this point are a long grind. At times it can feel like you're doing it for nothing, but hopefully you've internalized the mantra by this point. Love the process. But in case you need a bit more gratification faster, If gives you a break and pats you on the back to say, good job every now and then in the form of a credits roll. But then you're just gonna start a loop and start it up again. Finally, I want to talk about the level design of this game. It's nothing new at this point, but I actually liked how the 7 deadly sins were represented, and I loved not having to play a bunch of dungeons after completing these. I 100% expected to be whisked away to a new hub world to face more dungeons, but no, what you see is what you get. Now, online you'll witness lots of hate for this dungeon in particular. They are justified in their hatred, but I'm sure most people complaining about it were fans of Persona first. These people did not pay respect to the series' roots like you and I are doing now. Starting with Persona and booting up If, hearing that it's the roots of that series without playing SMT 1 or 2, without paying the soul cost then, well, they will be paying with their soul now. Except their curse will be different. First, they will fail SMT If's gameplay loop, blaming its poor design for their misjudgment. Then they will be forced to scorn If's name all over the message boards in an attempt to help others keep their souls, because they know that they will not be getting theirs back. Unfortunately, Shin Megami Tensei has no return policy on the souls it collects. This isn't Target. So by the time you reach the Sloth dungeon, yeah, you'll be a little miffed. But by this point, you've endured all kinds of shit, so this dungeon should be a cakewalk. Just believe in the Holy Trinity, and you'll be out of there in no time. Make sure you queue up some podcasts or something, though. You can even watch this video again while your in-game classmates mine away in these caves. Yeah, slave labor. Okay, not only have we completed SMTF, we've completed our retro Super Nintendo era, and we're ready to move on into what I dub Fanboy Land. Around the beginning of my SMT2 playthrough, naturally I looked up what was next in the series. It was impossible to find anything because the branding for SMT3 did not include the number 3 on it. Not a Roman 3, not a Japanese 3, not even a Hindu 3. And when you're dealing with a franchise as complicated as this one, which at this point in time has released this many Shin Megami Tensei related games, the inclusion of that 3 would have been great. For real, there are so many other SMT games titled in the most unexpected ways that it really feels like looking at a public transit bus map in a major city. For a while, I thought Nocturne was another division of the franchise, but eventually I uncovered the mystery. I bring that up because the remastered edition of Nocturne was announced during my playthrough of SMT2, and I slow clapped in glee when I saw the giant Roman parade with the title. Needless to say, I bought it on release day and bum rushed to finish SMT2. I actually booted If and Nocturne at the same time, but ultimately went with completing If first. So I'm pleased that it was as short a game as it was. Emulating Nocturne is still a possibility in this SMT playthrough that we're currently on. I've built a small loving attachment to these games, and if they want to coincidentally re-release the exact game from 20 years ago that I'm looking to steal, I'll fold and throw the measly 50 shekels in their direction. Sometimes even kings must learn to bow. The only thing bad about this decision is finally renouncing our faith in the Holy Trinity. Goodbye, y'all. You will be missed. We'll meet again the next time I want to torture myself with some other random old school video game. Thank you for all the time you've saved me, but I can ride my bike without training wheels. Now, this is super important, and before we move on, I want to tell you all about this pattern I've noticed in gaming culture. I'm sure you've noticed it as well. Why are the game franchises that start off as 2D, then transition to 3D, always held as the best version of those games? Hot take, Ocarina of Time was hot ass. And not the good kind either. Final Fantasy VII, trash. Now, of course, I don't believe either of those games are outwardly terrible or unplayable or anything. They're actually quite fun. But I'm trying to make a point here. What do you make of my take? What do you think about those games that I mentioned? If there was someone I knew who had never played a single Final Fantasy game and they told me that they are interested in playing to see if they liked it or not, I would never recommend Final Fantasy VII to start off. Not saying they shouldn't play it. There are just far better examples that exemplify what the Final Fantasy formula is. While a good game, I feel a lot of games get held up by communities just because they're in 3D. That fact is a reason why the PS1, PS2 eras were filled with terrible looking games in hindsight. The games that stood the test of time were those with the foresight to do cel shading or stick to their guns and not invest in realism too deeply. Of course, I'll concede that tons of IPs have definitely benefited from the switch to 3D. I'll be the first to say that Metal Gear Solid is one of the best games of all time, but many other franchises would have been way better off just doing what they did best. I love Sonic, but we all know the only 3D game worth its salt and worth keeping on the shelf in perfect condition is Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. And even then, that wasn't even their first rodeo in the realm of 3D graphics. It took them like 5 tries to get it right. So from now on, I will be referring to the first 3D game in a franchise as the best game phenomenon as 3D or bust. This refers to the players. If a game wasn't envisioned in 3D and you were developing it for the N64 or PS1, you can be sure that game wasn't going to be made, or it was going to be slammed on a Game Boy Advance with no budget. So yeah, 3D or bust is the concept, and it'll rear its ugly head a few more times, so take notes, remember what I said and what I mean when I bring it up. This brings me to my point considering Nocturne. I hate to say it, but it suffers from the same ailment. The fans hold it up as the absolute best the series has to offer, and while I definitely don't think it's a bad game, I'm still going to be viewing it from the point of what's come before it. Luckily, I did not play this game on release back in... no, that's a long time ago. So, no rose-colored glasses for me. I hope some of you SMT3 veterans watching this video don't bust a ball when I don't 100% stroke this game's ego. This game is hella different. First off, it has difficulty levels which the previous 2 games did not have. For me, choosing difficulties means there is a 50% chance this game will not respect me as a player. The easiest way for a developer to add difficulty in an RPG is to change damage outputs, income, HP gained, and just number stuff all around. That doesn't necessarily make a game harder to play, it just makes a game longer. I really believe difficulty should come from gameplay and not just number sliders. I always hope that when allowed to change difficulties, it'll shift the movesets of bosses and enemies. So, one Google check later, and there it is. Number sliders. This is gonna take a while. When an RPG just slides numbers around for difficulty, it just means I'm gonna spend more time grinding in an area before I can move on safely. And I know it's for no reason other than selecting a more challenging difficulty at the beginning. The game might be easier to access for most people on easier modes, but still, I just wish they did it in a way that respected the people who actually want a default experience. And the default experience is blurred when you add levels like hard and normal. Normal is the intended experience because it's normal, as the name implies. But is hard the correct experience because the game doesn't pull punches, even if it is just slightly longer gameplay? To truly experience games like these, do I need to play through both normal and hard? I especially dislike it when games have hard mode as a reward for completing a normal playthrough, like Metroid does. It's even more disheartening when there are even further difficulty modes to unlock. Of course, I have examples of the good and bad ends of this difficulty spectrum, but that's best saved for another day in another video. So, of course, you're immediately hit with the 3D graphics. We already spoke about why it happens and its effect on players and gaming as a culture. Still, it's only a matter of time before you start realizing how 3D or bust affects this game specifically. In Nocturne, it's a bit of a twist. Usually, 3D games leave out the one thing they were trying to accomplish, which is good graphics. But Nocturne looks pretty good. It looks really good. But this game, which is supposed to be a series progression, falls into the same pitfall that SMT1 did, the beginning of the series, which is a world filled with absolutely nothing. Now, hold up. SMT worlds being full of nothing is 100% expected at this point. Coming off of 1 and 2, I'm expecting to run into nothing, but you could tell that the previous 2 games were the way they were because of vision and hardware limitations. While playing SMT1, you notice lots of focus was put on the demon sprites at the expense of literally every other graphic in the game. I'm assuming because of the limited file size that is realistically jammable into a Super Nintendo card at the time. SMT2 saw a vast improvement in literally every other graphic that wasn't a demon, because it was the first game's weakest point. But now we're more than 10 years later facing the same issues because 3D models just take up vast amounts of space. I don't know how much memory a PS2 disc contains, but I'm willing to bet on Nocturne filling up that disc to the brim with absolutely nothing to show for it other than the demons themselves. I really hate this 3D or bust era because it really changed the course of many franchises that didn't need to be veered off. I'll bring this up again when we get to SMT4. With Nocturne being a 3D game, it's weird to see only the main character walking outside of a cutscene. Previous SMT games were filled with NPCs that inhabit the world, but you just get this little will-o-wisp that represents an NPC in this game. The only other creatures that inhabit the world are other demons that are, for the most part, just standing still in their idle animations. We know the demons will have the most attention to detail, and I don't blame them for placing them in various parts of the world because they make the scene look amazing no matter where they are. To those, I think I might be reeling it in kind of hard right now. I hope you don't think I'm being unreasonable here. This game came out in 2003. That is post Sons of Liberty, post Kingdom Hearts, post Hitman 2, post Ratchet & Clank. And I'm not sure of Atlus's budget at the time, but for a company that's existed since the 80s to be outmatched graphically like this is a point worth mentioning. This game just screams, we're bound by our technology and our budget, but we're going to do the best we can do with what we got to push out a 3D game. And sometimes that just ain't the answer. Now, you might think that I don't like the 3D in Nocturne. You'd be wrong. Because limitations are a part of any form, and while Nocturne has a clear issue with idle NPCs, damn did they write a great story. Yes, the world is noticeably empty while playing in it, but you don't care, because you know exactly why. It is the way it is because of the story. Finding creative ways to tackle your physical limitations and making your decisions purposeful is a skill that everyone needs to hone within their lifetime. Many things can be overlooked if people know you did things intentionally. So if you notice any foibles in what I'm saying, know it's by design. I do everything on purpose. So it's nice to see Nocturne handling 3D or bust very well. As someone who lives in the real world, has played countless games, and loved looking into what makes them great, I don't like will-o-wisps as NPCs. However, as a player and lover of art and the creative process, which is a greater force in my life than most other things, I know why they decided on will-o-wisps. I understand why the Demi-Fiend is the only character that walks the landscape, and in my book, Atlus gets a million thumbs up. This tells me that regardless of what's put in front of Atlus's face, they will turn around and turn out a good product. So, let us never speak about the graphics in this game again, because I spent a lot of time on it. Lots of mechanics make a comeback in this game. The most impactful ones that we're going to cover are press turn and moon phases. Searching press turn on YouTube yields tons of results. Press turn is a significant change for the rest of the IP. 16 games are using the press turn system, and it all started right here with Nocturne. Because this topic has been thoroughly discussed, and I'm a big fan of many videos about this topic, I'll keep it short. Press turn combat is Atlus's answer to revolutionizing the standard turn-based RPG combat of the past. For each member of your party, you'll be given an action represented by a symbol. In this game, the symbol is represented by the Magatama here. Every time you use an action in battle, it will consume one action symbol. If the action you use is a critical hit, or affects an opponent's weakness, you'll get the chance to use the symbol a second time, effectively giving you an extra turn in battle. This is great, innovative game design that respects the genre. I'd actually say that the press turn system and the Brave default system from Bravely Default are the best things to happen to turn-based RPGs ever. The worst thing to happen to turn-based RPGs? ATB gauge. That's a discussion for another day, perhaps even later in this video. But know that I solemnly believe that the ATB gauge system from Final Fantasy IV and on is antithetical to the genre as a whole and exacerbates the genre's problems with player engagement instead of fixing them. But enough of that, back to press turn. As great as it is, its inclusion in the game saw the departure of some of my favorite SMT staples: party size and playable human characters. The previous 2 SMT games allowed a party of 6 to command as you battle through the armies of demons, but with press turn, each symbol can potentially become 2 turns. With 6 members on a party, easy math says you're going to have some pretty one-sided fights favoring whoever goes first in a battle, and or a balancing nightmare. So it makes sense that they cut the party size down to just 4. I'm not mad at it. It's in line with many other JRPGs, which isn't necessarily a good or bad thing, but I'm sure it's satisfied someone out there who wanted a more traditional RPG experience. No, I would say the true bad thing that was lost were the human characters that could be played. In previous games, you could have 1 or more human characters in your party. Essentially, they function like the main character, and in many ways were superior to them due to their ability to consistently cast magic, a power the main character never had. In a party of 6, having 1 or 2 rotatable side characters was okay because you still had plenty of slots to rotate demons around. But now that the party size is 4, even having just 1 extra permanent character can change the whole dynamic of the game and the autonomy and freedom to create vastly different teams of demons. Later in the game, you get the chance to take Rido or Dante, and once they join the team, you immediately feel limited in your choices. Thankfully, you can still switch these 2 characters in and out of your team, but by the time I received Rido, my nostalgia went into full effect that I refused to put him on the bench, even though he's not that good. Between him, Pixie, and Cerberus, I had my team locked. Honestly, I would love to have Dante and Rido on an SMT3 team, and I often imagine them as the actual side characters permanently traveling alongside Demi-Fiend, and one day I feel I might make some art of it. All in all, this game does away with playable human characters, and that's thanks to the press turn system. At the start of the game, when our main character was in the hospital with his friends, I got really excited to play as them. But oh, was I so wrong. The second mechanic that is an absolute must to talk about is the moon phases. They really stepped it up with this one. They turned one of the most forgettable and annoying mechanics in the series into something that you cannot refuse in the best way possible. Not much functionality changed, but the implementation this time around is the most significant character art for a mechanic that I've ever seen in any video game. The moon phases play a large role in the narrative, inviting you to experiment and exploit it. Now that you can move more freely, walking around in circles to open chests still has the same amount of risk, but aren't as tedious, and that feels good. There are specific abilities that power up during the moon phases, and that invests you. There's something weird and different to fuse at every phase of the moon, and you'll find yourself constantly being aware of that fraction because there's so much more to do with it than just telling you when you can and can't speak to demons. The best part about knowing this is knowing that the moon phases were just as detailed in previous titles, but still, the way it's handled here in Nocturne, you can feel what the developers had in mind for the mechanic and tied as much as they could to it. Most importantly, the game teaches you about it as you play. It's not a mystery needing to be researched on the internet anymore, and it has the best culmination when you actually get through that final dungeon to see what the final boss has in store for you. Nocturne brings something new to the table. Experience gain and level up for demons on your team, and greater access to loadout / stat customization for them. This is the first game where demons can grow alongside your character. Although the leveling is drastically slower, with enough planning and knowledge of the moon phases, you can have any demon be on your team and still be a worthwhile pick. My urge is still to highly recommend not getting attached to any demon in particular, but Nocturne really gives you the tools to make that dream team you've always wanted, and that's precisely what I did. You already know about my dream team with Rido and Dante on it, but since I can't do that, I had to settle with making a Cerberus. Speaking of making demons, the entire fusion system has been redesigned to be more intuitive. Straight 3-way fusions are no longer available in this game, but fusing 2 demons and supplementing their outcome with a 3rd sacrifice demon is a great way to reimagine the concept. New Mitama demons and returning elemental spirits are all received at one central location, which streamlines their importance for fusing and marking a center hub for the game in the world. Of course, there were some things I was actually sad to see not make the cut. I was the biggest fan of the 80s inspired cyber people as main characters. I loved imagining myself with a keyboard strapped to my arm, traveling the world, shooting demons out of my hand like a children's card game. It's also why I recommend playing the first 2 games on an actual computer instead of a mobile device, because having access to a keyboard as an interface for the games is a very meta aesthetic choice. You feel like you're actually using a demon summoning program yourself, coding away the problems of the world with your cyber demons. Nocturne stripped all that away. I've seen many videos and read a few articles about why the aesthetic was dumped, and to paraphrase very shortly, they wanted to try something new. Still, I'm pretty sure the real truth is the developers didn't want to create a highly detailed 3D character with loads of wires that they may or may not get right. Ultimately, I'm not mad at the design for Demi-Fiend. It's cool and makes for an easy Halloween costume. But look at this guy. He is the most basic thing to animate because it's just a simple humanoid shape. No weird physics to think about botching, no clothing to animate as the character moves. It's just the easiest decision in a time where 3D is the new standard. Again, my passion for creative solutions says that this is fine, but as a fan of the past, I was sad to see that it was buried. In the same vein, I was indifferent about guns and swords being taken out of the game, and was relieved to not have to deal with different bullet and equipment types. The Magatama system created in its place is a much cleaner and easier to understand way of dealing with character customization. All you have to do is pick the one that fits your playstyle, and voila, you're done. On that note, Nocturne definitely made a dire mistake of not letting the abilities gained through the Magatama relearnable. A few of these skills are necessities for the game. If you overwrite them, you're pretty much shit out of luck. And if you ever plan on passing the game, you're just going to have to invest about 50 more hours to make up for the mistake of overriding one of those abilities with just raw stats, which is weak as fuck. A story element that's missing is the everlasting fight between the Messians and the Gaians. Gaia is mentioned at the beginning of the game and a few more times in certain dungeons, but these factions take a backseat. Honestly, they just punch in at the job to never be seen again. Another mechanic that called in sick is using magnetite to summon demons. But this one is fine. Again, considering the story of the world, the setting that Nocturne occurs in doesn't require magnetite because magnetite's only purpose was to summon demons into the real world, while this game takes place elsewhere. Can you tell I'm really trying to avoid spoilers here? The last thing I think was sad to see get fired was the impossibly long corkscrewing labyrinths. Not a single maze in this game triggered that particular case of claustrophobia with subtle hints of Stockholm Syndrome fear. These dungeons have their challenges, gimmicks, and I'm fucking lost moments, but none of them is as bad as what has come before. And I'll say it right now, SMT4 feels the same way. So I'm willing to bet that this specific style of game design has completely packed its bags and went to go live in the RPG old folks home for the no longer needed. So long, old pal. You gave me PTSD for something I never even thought was possible. The money I've saved on children's coloring books to simply avoid the twists and turns of certain pages that shall not be named. Thank you. Finally, negotiations seem to be the most straightforward in the entire series. Each demon gets straight to the point after a sentence or two. I wanted to see improvement in this department, but it seems to be slapped on just as much as in the previous games. It's so disappointing because there's no reason for it to be less engaging than negotiation was in SMT2. It's literally a core element of the gameplay, and it's just half-assed. We have 2 more stops on our trip through the SMT franchise, and the next one is Shin Megami Tensei 4, released for the Nintendo 3DS. But we must take our regularly scheduled detour from the main series, and now is a great time to try any of the Persona games. I specifically tried Persona 1, which was the catalyst for even starting my crazy journey through SMT. I actually booted up Persona 1 before I played Shin Megami Tensei 1, because that's what I originally wanted to play. But I was so confused at what was happening in game. That's when I mistakenly learned that it was one of many games in a series that doesn't even care about linearity as a concept. I didn't know that at the time, so I sure as hell should have stuck to it and just kept playing Persona 1. But now that I'm so far into Shin Megami Tensei, and looping all the way back around to Persona 1 now, Persona 1 just seems watered down. If you play through Persona 1, it'll most definitely be because of its story. Still, as of right now, I have not completed my playthrough of the game, so my opinions will most likely change. Needless to say, I don't have much to report. I'd also like to recommend Persona 3 because most of you guys watching this video are familiar with that game and just waiting for me to mention it, so here it is. Persona 3. There, it's in this part of the video. clean your pants up and let's move on. SMT 4. I'm gonna start on a downer. SMT 1, 2, and 3 had this epic scene of the main characters chilling with the demons. But for 4, no, it's nowhere to be found. I looked forward to this, but they've just shit my cereal. Maybe that's something else I'll draw one day. The demon army, not the shit cereal. You'll be playing SMT4 on your 3DS. Emulation for this game exists, but setting up a 3DS emulator isn't easy for most people. I can't in good conscience recommend it as a feasible way to play SMT4. So nope, you'll have to suck it up and borrow your little sister's purple DS, head on over to the eShop and pick it up. Besides, nothing beats playing DS titles on original hardware. Unfortunately, this means I don't have an easy way to create good looking screencaps for this video, so I'll be using found video from YouTube. Thank you to all the content creators doing work I 100% steal from you. And may the algorithm bless you in all your endeavors. SMT4 does little to shake up the groundwork that Nocturne had laid. If anything, it's a game that lies firmly in its wake, much like SMT2 was an improvement upon the foundations that SMT1 set. SMT4 being released after Nocturne is no different. If you like the gameplay of Nocturne, you're going to appreciate the gameplay here in 4. I feel many changes in SMT4's vision are subtle, yet very deliberate. And in the bulk of our time with SMT4, we'll be discussing these small changes. For the most part, battles end quicker, the variety of demons have skyrocketed, and the number of skills and customizability has gone way up. The main character can learn the same attacks that demons can learn outside of a select few, and it feels good to customize them. Everything is better, quicker, and more responsive. It's so good that most returning mechanics work just as well as they did in the previous entries. As the 4th game in a series spanning over 20 years, I wouldn't expect any less. But again, let's dig into those small details that experienced veterans like we are now will notice. First, the good. Coming off the isolation of Nocturne, the populated world presented in 4 is a welcome comeback to the series' roots. There's always someone to chat with. And transitioning from exploring the barren world of Tokyo to finding the next settlement actually feels like an accomplishment that binds you to the struggle the characters endure while fighting for survival. The best example of this is running into Ikebukuro and noticing the terrible state it's in. The stakes of the world weigh heavy on you, and they compel you to complete as many side missions as you can. Seeing other humans populate the world and summon demons themselves makes me finally feel less alone on my mission to save the world. The implication is that I'm no longer obligated to save the world. Others can do that. I'm choosing to, and that's much more profound. And now, with all of the great battle mechanics of Nocturne, I feel more in control than ever when battling the demons of the Expanse. Another change that's neither here nor there is income. No longer do you gather Maka from winning battles. Instead, you need to collect relics placed randomly throughout the world and turn them in for cash. Seems cool story-wise, but mechanically it's a large hassle. It makes you do a lot of tedious back and forth and zigzagging, which sucks when you just want to get on with the game. I actually made the mistake of ignoring it altogether. There aren't many things you need to buy to win battles or anything, so it wasn't a huge problem until I ran into the parts that needed money. And man, I was broke. And I'm talking like large sums. Sucks when you can relate to your avatar and your mutual journeys through the struggle. I play video games to escape, goddammit. Why am I broke in a video game? Once I got used to collecting relics, I found it easier to fuse stuff I needed. Definitely a lateral decision at best. And while we're talking about currency, magnetite is mentioned, but there is no system for it. People are said to have a strong magnetite, which is likely why only certain people can summon demons, but beyond that, there is no existing system in place. A welcome addition is the concept of apps, a cringe name in hindsight once you consider that this game was released during the smartphone boom. Everything was fine to keep up technologically. The DS was no different, but apps in SMT4 represent a long list of upgrades that you can buy with points that you accumulate every time you go up a level. It's nice to buy stuff that fits your playstyle and, more importantly, doesn't waste time with something you don't want to touch. This is also a great place to know that the Demon Summoning program has been brought back along with its slick design. Seeing Steven pop up in 4 is a genuine surprise. I did mention him before because I'm trying my best to keep out as many spoilers as possible, but this man was in SMT 1 and 2, but was absent from 3. Now that he pops up in 4, I realize that this dude is the most mysterious guy in the franchise, and if there was ever an important character to tie to this IP, I'd say it's him. He's the creator of the technology used to speak and control demons, yet he literally has like 20 lines of dialogue throughout the series as a whole. I really hope he makes an appearance in SMT5. I am genuinely invested. Demon negotiation is better than ever, a true highlight in the series. It still feels a bit random, but the demons usually have interesting things to say, and they even assign you with quests. I couldn't wait to play a title in the series that did such a stable mechanic justice since the first game. It's not perfect, but it's the best example so far. It's a shame that this comes so late in the series' run, and I really hope negotiations can evolve in some way when SMT5 releases. Finally, the Ring of Gaia returns to the series bigger than ever, but their opposing counterpart, the Order of Messia, didn't make the cut this time. This makes 2 games where the Messians don't have a significant presence. This may be because SMT2 leaned very heavily on the Order of Messia as a plot point. Fusion brings a new addition. It takes away the sacrifice fusions from 3, but adds these special fusions. You don't even need to have the demon in your party for these. The only requirement is having owned all the pieces to a fusion at any point during your playthrough, and then you can always pay Maka to summon the demon to your party. Now onto the one change I don't like in SMT4. The overworld that your character runs through no longer has random battles. Instead, you get a sword to attack these things in the world, which represent roaming demons. Touching one of these balls of light triggers a battle. SMT4 released 10 years after Nocturne. For some reason, in that time span, it was determined by the gaming community that random battles are bad and archaic game design. Coincidentally, developers of RPGs were struggling with player engagement and trying to break away from the normal formula to stand out. While I think these claims are justified and random battles should be addressed, I genuinely believe that showing enemies on an overworld and then having the game cut to a turn-based battle once approaching the enemy and striking it with a melee attack is a bad idea. Or at least it's poorly implemented in SMT4. If my character can swing a sword and has different attack animations depending on what's equipped, just go all the way and code an action game. The whole game I'm wishing I could actually dodge, jump, and slide, but no, it's only a way to start a battle. It feels like a means to an end, a way to increase player engagement and tackle what a section of gamers think is annoying. Do you know what's more annoying? Battling something on a handheld device and then looking away for literally a second after completion of a battle, only to find yourself unintentionally entering a new battle because your eyes weren't glued to the screen and something walked up to you. Here's one of the reasons why I love turn-based RPGs. If you don't interact with the game doesn't interact with you. They don't punish you for being idle in-game. If you stop, the world stops. Nothing is timing you. Nothing is forcing you to consistently glare at the screen. Nothing is commanding your attention. Because of how time is handled in this genre, RPGs become one of the best ways to pop in and out of gaming in your daily life. These are games that I can play late into the wee hours of the night, accidentally fall asleep, and then pick back up again when I wake up. I remember playing Pokemon all through grade school because I could sneak in a few steps here and a few battles there when teachers weren't looking because the turn-based nature of the game allowed for that slow burn style of play. I played Fire Emblem Awakening on the public bus, literally having to deal with constant distractions around me as I played. You've got drunk people, large bumps in the road, and the looming threat of a man removing his porcelain eye covers to reveal the vacant holes where his eyes had once been right in front of me. Trust me, it's a true story and happened more times than you think, and still managed to get through the game. I have so much to think about when playing on the go, and RPGs are the only game that I can reliably count on not to throw me under the public bus, so to speak, when I have to look away. I remember popping in the Final Fantasy IV remake into my DS for the first time. Thoroughly invested in the hype, having played the first 3 remakes on GBA and DS, and up until that point, those were the only Final Fantasy games I had played. I was playing the series in order. I'll never forget looking down at my screen and seeing Cecil dead, wondering why he died. It happened multiple times, and through due process, figuring out that I was distracted most of the time while playing Final Fantasy IV. My attention was always divided, and unlike before, I was now being punished for it. And of course, if you've watched this far, I'm referring to the ATB gauge, another time-based mechanic. When RPGs start to throw these timeless elements away, it starts to feel like an attack on me as a player in the real world. These games are great for people with real lives ahead of them, and it sucks to think about them not existing in full force just for some silly, I don't like random battles as a concept movement. I'm clearly passionate about this tiny element of SMT4, but it really changes how I approached playing this game. I can no longer play it during my downtime at work. I can no longer sneak out some battles when I was hanging with my friends. I've died enough times due to being in a battle that I didn't want to be in just because I put my DS down just to grab some food from the stove. Whereas a movie for people like me who want the genre to stay where it's been, an ode to pen and paper games, item management, skill management, HP management. That's where the difficulties of RPGs lie, not in their action mechanics. In all of my SMT experience, this has been hands down the most annoying and, dare I say, insulting thing. It doesn't make the game unplayable. It doesn't even make it harder. It's just, why? And look at these things. Why are they doing 3D environments if they can't even afford to have the demons on screen? No, we get this random entity that represents a demon. The last time I saw something like this was in Pokemon Red and Blue. Remember when you looked at your party and got some generic ass nondescript Nidoking looking thing that represented a Pokemon with an actual sprite? Remember SMT1 when multiple demons look like this? The same concept is happening here on your DS. Financially, they couldn't make every demon have a sprite in the overworld, so they created 5 or 6 of these things, and we're like, yup, that'll do, high fives all around, yeah. And as far as I can tell, there isn't any explanation for why they specifically appear like this in-game. If you're going to get rid of random battles, don't replace it with some half-assed system reminiscent of what the technology from 20 years ago had to do to scrape by. So far, the best way to tackle random battles is to give players control over it. Many games allow you to turn random battles off if you prefer to run around any given landscape. Again, Bravely Default enables you to turn them off or double them if you'd like. I'm not saying it's the best way to handle this, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, not a misdirected sidestep that SMT4 takes to the problem. Anyway, again, press turn returns for SMT4, but we also see the return of side characters traveling with our player character. The developers wanted them to continue to participate in battles like in the days of yore, but that doesn't work with the press turn system and a game with a focus on collecting different monsters. If you let them in the party, that means they get a press turn, and just like that, your carefully created turn-based revolution turns into a one-sided nightmare. Or, if you let them take up a party slot, then those playing the game won't experiment with the hordes of demons lying around. So, they went with a different approach. In every battle, you get a randomly selected ally who performs moves independently at the end of your turn. When that happens, you immediately wish you could just control their actions because they usually do more harm than good. Worst of all, they become a talking point when arguing the validity of the smirk system. To me, this is a poor way to revive the feeling of having traveling companions. I welcome the extra attack here and there, but after a few hours with them on your side, you start to learn each of your companions' movesets, and when you got a human brain, watching an AI make choices can be infuriating, especially when you really need a healing spell. Random actions and traveling companions do not go well in a game. I understand why they added this feature, because it would have been awkward to travel with allies that didn't do anything on the account of press turn, but this, unfortunately, is a prime example of the story not quite matching up with its gameplay. Other games have handled random AI by letting players choose their allies' battle patterns from an in-game menu, and I think SMT4 would have greatly benefited from a system like this. There is one final thing I want to address about this game, and it's the graphics. As expected with a series with this much staying power, this topic is very divisive. I'm the first to say the game is objectively beautiful and has a homemade charm to it. None of the demons are renditions of art, it's the art itself. And I, for one, think they look great, but this game came after Nocturne, a 3D game. So naturally, fans want to see 3D graphics continue with the next entry in the series. But, of course, making fully animated 3D graphics for each demon on a 3DS isn't the easiest thing to do, and they already gave up on it here. Even Pokemon barely got it right, but that's the problem with 3D. People expect it. They reserve any critical judgment on the issue for no other reason than graphics. I get it's a standard, but most of all, it is a trend. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. It's such a shame to see these people who vehemently want 3D when they don't get what they want. They label games bad simply because they aren't in 3D. This problem is rooted at the dawn of the first 3D polygon in gaming, and now we're in what I call late stage 3D stroking. I'm talking circa 2010 to 2015, PS3, Xbox 360, 3DS. I salute those who make the bold decision to not only craft a 2D game, but to commit to PNG art freshly exported from Photoshop. It's a firm no on their part, and it's sick to watch. And to fully understand this, let's walk back through the series. SMT 1 and 2 were both on the Super Nintendo with more or less forced 2D graphics. Now, let's imagine a timeline where SMT 4 was released before Nocturne, as is. Going from the pixelated sprite art of the past directly to fully rendered art could have been unique. The low poly 3D model running around the overworld would have worked and looked great on a PS1. So we could have had an earlier release date than the years it took for Nocturne to release. The demon summoning program would have still been present, cementing it as a serious staple for years to come. Those arbitrary balls of light representing enemies could have easily been overlooked since games of that era, and especially the 2 games before it in its own series, had all sorts of problems regarding file sizes. And best of all, a Magic Nocturne was released after 4. Just imagine the potential of that game if they were allowed to grow naturally instead of the gaming world growing around it. Imagine actually seeing human ghosts and demons walking around. But I digress. That is not our timeline. Instead, our timeline is full of whiny fans who complain about the superficial BS, and corporate shareholders that will follow any trend just to see profit instead of trusting the artists to innovate something new. Shame on both these forces for constantly pushing developers to follow the trends. It's the reason games like Pokemon will remain in perpetual stasis. It's the reason we haven't seen another F-Zero title. And to be a bit more relevant, it's the reason Persona as a series gets more attention than SMT ever will. But all that's about to change with SMT 5. I started playing these games early enough to give myself enough time to play all of them without rushing, precise enough to see a remaster released just as I was deciding how to play it, and just late enough to not have blue balls for a game that's been announced about 4 years ago. Cheers to those of you who are still here, so thank you. But first, to answer the question posed earlier, what games should I play in the SMT series? Well, you're going to regret staying this long now because the answer is, play whatever ones that interest you. I know it's not the handheld answer you wanted, but SMT ain't for babies. It requires patience, intuition, and your soul, remember? If I had any advice, it would be to play them in sequential release date order. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And I hope I've convinced you of this. But as an alternative, try 1, 2, 4, then 3 last, followed by 5 is acceptable. I really think this series' reputation could have been stainless, the gold standard if they successfully managed to steer clear of the 3D hype train of the new millennium. Hey, it isn't perfect, but you just might see into a reality of a franchise growing linearly, steadily improving, sharpening, and holding everything they've learned from their mistakes and successes. Yes, consider playing 1, 2, 4, 3, then 5, the neutral path through playing the Shin Megami Tensei series, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the law path of this series, and literally any advice other than this is the chaotic path through the series. Highly don't recommend that though. The latter games handhold you to a point that makes the earlier games nigh unplayable. Alright guys, thanks for completing the largest segment of this video, which was talking about all of the mechanics and things that have changed, but I specifically left out music. Shin Megami Tensei as a franchise has a large, vast library of music, and instead of me bringing it up with each new entry in the series, I'm just going to do a fireplace scroll with this, and maybe the last 5 minutes of this video will be just us circling through, so yeah. Peace out.